Yo, what's up? The long-awaited Prenc Audio Kinglake drums mixing video. Today we're going to check out a song called Ornament by the band Revaira. And I fully said that wrong. It is Ornament by Revaira. German band, very talented band. Done a few singles with them now. And this is probably the heaviest one I've done with them. Super fat drums, fat guitars, super loud. But yeah, I'm going to show you guys how I mix Kinglake drums. So there's a lot to cover. I'm going to go straight in, raw dog it. We're going to look at the routing first because that's essential for me to get my sound. So basically, I have two mix buses. One that has a compressor like normal, everyone's got a mix bus with a compressor. And then one that just has no compressor, so it's not getting compressed at all. And then they sum together and go to the master. This effectively gives me a way to send volume of things outside of the compression and just get them louder without anything pulling it down. I guess the most extreme version of this is maybe bass and cymbals. Like if I go to my cymbals, that's the mix, the standard mix bus send, and then this is the parallel send, which is full. And if I turn off the parallel, it's just a little bit of cymbal because I don't want high end messing up my mix bus comp really. Bass is another one that I do that with. That's the mix parallel. Turn off the mix parallel. It's just there a little bit. I don't want the low end to blow out the compressor and make things get really weird. I guess the main thing that goes through the mix in this instance is kick, snare, and toms. Room goes through it a fair amount. Guitars, obviously. Maybe I'll just solo the mix and you can actually check it out. The mix bus. I'll solo the mix bus. So a healthy amount of kick, snare, and guitars. Then the parallel. That sounds very silly because it's not compressed and it's not in context with anything. It's just volume as I need it as I'm mixing. So it's never going to sound great. But either does the mix really. But them together forms the instrumental part of the mix. I typically send vocals straight to the master, leads, production, effects straight to the master as well, because I don't want them stuffing up the instrumental side of things. But we're going to check out this part of the song. It's got a good riff, goes into a heavy part, clean vocals, all of that, and yeah. We're going to dive straight in on the kick. I guess something I should cover first is the actual setup of the instrument. It's all routed out, multiple mics, all to their own channel. Overhead goes to its own channel. The rooms are separated, so there's a kick room, snare room, tom room, cymbal room. In the plugin, I also have a bit of ADSR treatment. I like to shorten my kicks a fair amount to about 300 milliseconds. I even go shorter than that. Every one of them for the most part. Just so it doesn't get too much sustain. With compression and parallel compression, you can really bring up a lot of sustain and it really makes your mix fall apart quite quickly. And this is essential for me. It's the same as gating really, but just doing it within a plugin. You don't have to tweak a gate or anything. But this is the kick sound as is. So we'll go through, bypass everything, and we'll check out the individual channels. Nothing on any of them, just a bit of volume changes, just not straight default out of the plugin. But it's also worth noting that when I mix, it's never in order. Like some of these plugins could have been put in later on, like I could have got to like almost the end of the mix stage and then come back and tweak something and stuff like that. So this is really just showing a dry to wet example, but I mean, it's everything in context. As you're mixing the song, you make tweaks and everything. You never just mix the kick and then that's it, that's done. You always come back and tweak it. So yeah, keep that in mind. But this is the kick raw. So it's nice and short from the ADSR. Doesn't have a lot of like length to it, which sometimes does happen, especially with subs. They sort of just like woof on the outside of the head a lot. So I like to shorten that so I don't get any of that weird stuff going on. First up is EQ. Just sucking out boxy stuff, boosting the click areas that I want. Without. Nothing too crazy. Now the kick comp is 1176. I like these for slower songs. Faster, they sort of suck out too much and it gets a bit weird, but they're super smacky, like thuddy, which is really cool for slower stuff as well. This is what this sounds like off and on. Not doing a hell of a lot, but still helps. Transify. It's cooler than EQ. It's dynamic, so it's not just like a broadband high boost in this case. That's all I'm doing, just a little bit of that. And it just adds like this front end tooth to the kick attack. It's not so noticeable on its own, but once the mix is going, it helps a lot to not just make the kick super clicky, but make it dynamically clicky. So it's not just like a death metal trigger, just like tick, 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 tick. It sort of just like comes and goes. I love this. I haven't seen anyone do this before, but I can press the low mids, sort of like lows, make them super attacky and just boost the shit out of it, man. It sounds sick. This plugin sort of does something to the phase of the low end of the kick, which just makes it sound like, I guess, way more thuddy. Like there's no way that just 7 dB boost with, I mean, an equal amount of gain reduction changes low end like that. If you did this with EQ, it would not sound anywhere near similar. But yeah, something about this plugin just makes that area sound really cool. Next is Final EQ. This would have been just sculpting for the mix. I mean, it doesn't really make sense too much. So I'm sure I was just mixing and just on the fly changing stuff. Made it less clicky, not sticking out much. I guess I could have done without Transify after seeing that, but yeah, I mean, that's how these things get. Next we got Snare. I've actually added a trigger track to this, which is from Kinglake Drums library. It's Pork Pie Low Snare, and what I'm using is the Bell Brass Mid. But adding the low snare just makes it sound, I mean, it gives me both tunings. It sounds deeper and just more of everything I like. I am doing a bunch of processing to that, but I'll turn all the plugins off and we'll check this out first because everything else is with nothing. So that's what that sounds like raw. Giving it more attack. Making it smack. Boosting a bunch of low ends, sucking out some mids. And then turning it up and clipping it. So that's like the meat of it, I suppose. This is all of it together. So you can hear that the mid is, I mean, it's much louder, but it's also tuned a fair amount higher, so you sort of lose that stick attack a bit. Whereas if I add in the low one, it gives me that, and it gives me a bit of body that I'm probably chasing later in the mix. First up, we have EQ. It's Just boosting highs, sucking out some low mid, and making the high end dynamic so the snares don't rattle so much. The snares came through the top mic a fair amount, more than I would like, to be honest. So I usually do this to tame that somewhat. Like it just hangs around too long. And that just makes it come and go. Sort of like the FabFilter Pro MB trick, but I mean, less hectic. A gate to make ghost notes and stuff a bit more relaxed. Like if I find that. It's only 3 dB worth, but I find like when you're going through mixing, it does make a fair amount of difference. Especially on like blast beats and stuff like that, I'll just tuck them down a bit. Because of all the compression, if you don't have something like this, it just like makes a ghost note not a ghost note. And it just sounds like a weird loud hit. Transient Designer, boosting it a lot. Nothing special. Distressor, also not doing too much crazy stuff. Transify again, tiniest bit. More EQ, giving me more highs. Clipping, and more clipping. So pretty much just taming the transient. If I go over to the master and bypass all these plugins, you'll see that the snare is super peaky if I solo everything else. So that's like 6 dB above everything else. If I get rid of those. Like another 6 dB. So chuck those on and it just chills it out a little bit. That will help with the mix bus and stuff like that as well. That won't duck the compressor as hard. And that's the snare. That's sending to the parallel just a little bit. Sending to parallel comp a fair amount, but we'll get to that. Toms, not too much going on. It's the steel toms, tuned low and thuddy. This is them raw. And then I'll go to the rack. So a fair amount of compression, boosting some highs. This gate is to tame the sustain. Similar to how I talked with the ADSR, this is kind of doing the same thing, but because it's a lot of compression going on, it has to happen after. So the ADSR is actually not working because the compressor brings up the sustain and then I need to tame it after the fact. So if I turn this off, it rings a lot, but just brings it down, gets it out of the way. It's also only working off the high end. Good thing about sample drums and program drums is that there's no bleed, so anything you trigger off is quite accurate. So if I go just off the high end, it comes and goes so fast that the gate won't trigger off any sustain or anything like that. So I can design the gate's decay quite well with just the high end. I think the floor has virtually the same. Yep. That's just ringing for days, but a bit more relaxed. Still ringing a lot, but not as bad. It sort of drops off and doesn't stay constant. Not much EQ, just getting rid of the lows, adding some mids. I think that was the same for the rack. Rack is just a tiny bit of low. And then on the bass, clipping it. Times you can get away with a lot. I sort of go until they fart and then bring them back a little bit. Or sometimes I just let them fart. Who cares? Less highs, less lows. And this is just reverb for later in the song. That's automated. Cymbals. We've got all the mics spot mic'd out. I like to chuck MIDI tracks on and clean them out so I have a visual for automation and stuff. You do have to mute the region in Logic though, or else it'll double play the MIDI and it gets super loud. But this helps to just like write in anything. I mean, not that I really did much, but if it is a super dense, complex song, this is a good way to just know what's happening when without having to go into the MIDI and all that, because that's just a mess. But seeing it this way is super easy. Hats. Getting rid of a spike. Let's check that out. Yeah, it's a bit gross. Sounds better now. Ride, nothing. Stack. It's pretty short and white noisy. Find a spot. I know there's 4 hits here somewhere. Let's get rid of those. If you look on the analyzer, you'll see it's insane that it has that much information that high. And then to make it less short, China, bit of high end. Cool. Overheads, so crashes and everything else really. I like to put a Pro Q3 in dual mono for it so I can get rid of the resonances and stuff. Usual way to approach this is put it on, turn down one side, find the cymbal that's on that side, so the left hand crash. So it gets hit a couple times there. Zildjian Customs, glassy as ever, but I love them. They just need a bit of treatment. So I'll do that, turn that side off, go to the next side. That one's not so bad, but yeah. That's a good way to EQ each side independently. If I did this all together, the left-hand cymbal would suffer from the right-hand's cuts, the right would suffer from the left-hand's cuts, which is not what I want. All together with some bus stuff. A bit more EQ. Make them a bit airy, sort of float on top of the mix. Just too much information there. Soothe. Bit hard to tell what that's doing. A mixing thing as well in context. And then, yeah, this would have been mixing while I was mixing as well. So I like the attack and the brightness, but yeah, as you listen in context with the song. Yeah, too bright when the whole song's going. And as I said earlier, the cymbals are sending to the mix parallel as much as they possibly can, and then not so much to the mix. So they don't get compressed by the mix bus compressor really. Rooms. It's just all the kick room summed into one track. I think it's both the same level. Yeah, both the same level on everything. So here's the kick room. Getting rid of some lows. 1176. Adding volume, making it sustain and smack a bit more. This is more of that again. That's the real juice. And then getting rid of more lows. The other tracks will sort of look kind of similar, but different EQ really. Got the gate again on the snare to chill out the ghost notes and soft hits. Just makes them a little bit quieter so they don't stick out as much. A lot of EQ. Making it less bright. It's probably something I should have addressed when I made the plugin, is to chill it out a bit more, but the main room sound is a hallway, super reflective, so it's no surprise that there's lots of high-end information. Then 76 again. Not doing too much. This guy will do a bit. Just a bit longer. Then less high mids again. Onto toms. If you can hear snoring, it's my dog in the background. Couldn't bring myself to kick her out. 1176. It's helping a fair bit. Transient again. Then more high mids. Out of the way. Cymbals, I don't typically do much to cymbal rooms. I don't like them really. So I just make them quiet and a bit relaxed. They do add a lot. They give a lot more usable high mids that don't sound too gnarly. The room bus processing. Less brightness again. L1 to tame the snare. Not drastic, but if you go a bit harder, it gives room for the direct snare to come through. Sometimes room tracks can unintentionally get quite transient heavy, so it's good to tame that. Less high mids again. Say that was a good move. Then the only thing left is parallel comp. So this is kick, just going bus 20, snare, and toms, nothing else. That's what this sounds like. Nukin with a distressor. All together. If I get rid of the parallel. Just gives it a bit more slam. Helps cut through the mix a bit more. That's it. That's how I mix Prenc Audio Kinglake drums. EQs, comps, routing, the whole lot. Hope you learned some stuff. Gonna try out some stuff on your productions. Pick up the library maybe. I'm gonna drop the trigger TCI file of the snare, Tama Bell Brass, mid tuning in the description and on my website. You guys can get that for free. Check it out, see if you like it. And yeah, thanks for watching this long video. Cheers.